Good morning, Team Alabama. Please read with me in Hatchet. We are at the top of page 134. We are on page 134. Please read along with me on your Chromebooks. So he's been trying to catch these fool birds. But in the end, he found that if he saw the bird sitting and moved sideways towards it, not directly towards it, but at an angle back and forth, he could get close enough to put the spear point out ahead almost to the bird and thrust and lunge at it with it. He came close twice, and then, down along the lake, not far from the beaver house, he got his first meat. The bird had sat and he had lunged, and the 2 points took the bird back down into the ground and killed it almost instantly. It had fluttered a bit, and Brian had grabbed it and held it in both hands until he was sure it was dead. Then he picked up the spear and the bow and trotted back around the lake to his shelter where the fire had burned down to the glowing coals. He sat looking at the bird, wondering what to do. With the fish, he had just cooked them whole and left everything in and picked the meat off. This was different. He would have to clean it. It had always been so simple at home. He would go to the store and get a chicken, and it was all cleaned and neat, no feathers and insides. And his mother would bake it in the oven, and he would eat it. His mother, from the time before, would bake it. Now he had the bird, but he had never cleaned one, never taken the insides out or gotten rid of the feathers, and he didn't know where to start. But he wanted the meat, had to have the meat, and that drove him. In the end, the feathers came off easily. He tried to pluck them out, but the skin was so fragile that it pulled off as well. So he just pulled the skin off of the bird, like peeling an orange, he thought, sort of. Except that when the skin was gone, the insides fell out the back end. He was immediately caught in a cloud of raw odor, a kind of steamy dung odor that came up from the greasy coil of insides that fell from the bird, and he nearly threw up. But there was something else to the smell as well, something kind of richness that went with his hunger and that overcame the sick smell. He quickly cut off the neck with his hatchet, cut the feet off the same way, and in his hands he held something like a small chicken with a dark, fat, thick breast and small legs. He set it up on some sticks on the shelter wall and took the feathers and the insides down to the water to his fish pond. The fish would eat them or eat what they could, and the feeding action would bring more fish. On second thought, he took out the wing and tail feathers, which were stiff and long and pretty banded and speckled in browns and grays and light reds. There might be some use for them, he thought. Maybe work them into the arrows somehow. The rest he threw in the water and saw the small round fish begin tearing at it and washed his hands. Back at the shelter, the flies were on the meat and he brushed them off. It was amazing how fast they came. But when he built up the fire and the smoke increased, the flies almost magically disappeared. He pushed a pointed stick through the bird and held it over the fire. The fire was too hot. The flames hit the fat and the bird almost ignited. He held it higher, but the heat was worse, and finally he moved it to the side a bit, and there it seemed to cook properly, except that it only cooked on one side and all the juice dripped off. He had to rotate it slowly, and that was hard to do with his hand, so he found a forked stick and stuck it in the sand to put his cooking stick in. He turned it, and in that way he found a proper method to cook the bird. In minutes, the outside was cooked, and the odor that came up was almost the same as the odor when his mother baked chickens in the oven, and he didn't think that he could stand it. But when he tried to pull a piece of breast meat off the meat, it was still raw inside. Patience, he thought. So much of this was patience, waiting and thinking and doing things right. So much of all of this, so much of all living was patience and thinking. Great fact, guys. So much of this, so much of living was patience and thinking. He settled back, turning the bird slowly, letting the juices go back into the meat and letting it cook and smell and cook. And then came the time, or a time, when it didn't matter if the meat was done or not. It was black on the outside and hard and hot, and he would eat it. He tore a piece from the breast, a sliver of meat, and put it in his mouth and chewed carefully. Chewed as slowly and carefully as he could to get all the taste, and thought, never, never in all the food, all the hamburgers and the malts, all the fries and the meals at home, never in all the candy and the pies and the cakes, never in all the roasts or the steaks or the pizzas, never in all the submarine sandwiches, never, never, never had he tasted anything as fine as that first bite, first meat. Have a great day, Team Alabama.